Hi, I'm Dale Popovich and welcome to my studio today. This is just going to be a brief discussion on structures of trees, and I'm going to give you a demonstration on how to paint a tree. The thing about trees is they're really a wonderful plant that you need to study. You need to study them at all times of the years, but one of the best time of the years to study them is in the winter when most of the foliage or all the foliage is gone. That you can actually see the structure going up, the way the limbs come out, the way the branches are at the end. Except for the pine trees, they have the same structure during the summer, winter, spring, and fall, except in the winter they do have the snow-laden branches that do change the form a slight bit. And also, different times of the year and different types of light will change the color of the trunk. Trunks are not brown, they're not gray. They can be all colors depending on the light, the time of the year, and even the moisture. So what I want to do is talk to you about first the different structures of the trees, and then we can go on to the painting. I illustrated some very simple trees here. Of course, I could not do all of them, but a basic tree grows upward here, and the branches at the lower end of the tree usually come out on more of a perpendicular angle from the tree. And as the tree grows up, the branches go up. So they start reaching more for the sun. And also, naturally, the branches are heavier here, and they get lighter and softer on the outer edges up here. One of the things I'm always telling my students is that the tips of the branches or the outer edges of the tree are warmer. And it's a little bit cooler on the trunk sometimes. But out here, especially in the late winter or winter, you'll see a lot of warmth on the end of these branches when they're just showing their skeletal structure, is that they are warmer. It's a little bit cooler on the inner part of the tree, but try to get the form of the tree right. The branches go out and up as they go up the tree, and so do the branches themselves. They're really trying to compete for the sun. Now, this next grouping of trees here, a lot of trees grow in clumps, such as river birch and other types of birches sometimes. And even some of the maples will grow this way, certain breeds of maple. But when you draw these trees in like this, they actually grow out from one another because, again, they are competing for the sun. And the same thing is that the branches go out more perpendicular at the bottom and then raise up on a sharper angle as it grows up, reaching for the sun. Now, we have here something of what you would call a type of oak tree. The oak tree has very heavy limbs, especially down at the bottom. They usually have heavier trunks because they can support those heavier limbs, but these limbs here are actually casting shadows across the tree itself. These limbs here go out away from the tree and back of the tree, and I have put them in a lighter value so that they look like they're in back of the tree. These here are coming more towards you. They'll have a sharper edge on them or a darker value, maybe perhaps more intense color, but you want to be able to get the movement going up as it grows. Remember, I'm often trying to correct the students because they are drawing their branches like rubber. They actually grow in different movements as they go up the tree here per season. Every year it has a different movement to it. Don't show them like this. They don't grow like that unless they've been bent or damaged at one point. Try to get them to move in different directions up the tree. And over here we have some grouping of pine trees. I've tried to make all the different pine trees a little bit different so there's a movement. I'm always, again, catching some of my students, making them look all the same, look like they came out of the Kmart Christmas tree lot. They have dark areas and light areas. The top of their boughs are light, underneath is dark. And as they get down towards the bottom on the trees itself, or the pine trees, it does get a lot darker because all these upper areas are here are casting more and more shadows as you get down towards the bottom A lot of the pine trees are in shadow. But try to get different movements. They have different shapes. Take note of that when you are sketching them before you paint them. It's always very important to sketch before you start painting to understand your subject and know it well. And last but not least, when you're doing a grouping of trees that has foliage on it, sketching or painting, sketch the large area first, the mass of the branches or the leaves and so forth that are being held up by the branches, then go into the trees down below. Now, the thing about grouping these trees together, try, even if they are equal in distance and equal in thickness, change that. Change the negative space between them, change the size or thickness of the tree itself, and understand that underneath the tree and up here, you're going to have parts of cast shadows being cast down on itself. Underneath here, you're going to have a lot of shadow. But try to keep this very simple down here and keep it so you have variety between the shapes of the trees, the size of the trees, and the spaces of the trees. It's very important. But this right here, a lot of people like to copy exactly what's there. You need to correct what's there and make it better. Okay, I'm going to be doing a watercolor of this tree over here. I took a picture of this tree up in the Upper Peninsula. It was near Lake Superior. I don't have an identification on the tree, but it was such an interesting form. So when I've drawn it here, I have simplified it quite a bit because there are a lot of what I call tentacles coming out of the tree here and there, and there's other trees in front of it. I've simplified it simply for the demonstration. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I have this drawn on 300-pound Kilimanjaro paper, which I use occasionally. And I am going to go and I'm going to create a very simple background here, not by trying to portray anything that is in the photo all that much because the concentration is on the tree. But we're going to try to get some sort of semblance of order. I'm going to include some of the tree within the first wash to make it adhere to the rest of the photograph. I try not to leave any areas untouched when I'm blocking in. Always block in from large to small, background to foreground, light to dark, intense to less intense as you move through it. And I'm going to float a couple of these things up in here so they remain soft. But I always look at the photo, my subject matter, as abstract. And then bring out the rest of it into realism as I move through it. So I'm going to just lightly put in a feeling of those trees in the background without putting them in. And this would be my first wash. So we're going to stop at this particular point and then pick it up. Okay, now we're going to go back to the tree. Not too much done in the background. Like I said, the concentration is on the tree. And I am going to go in here and I'm going to mix some ultramarine blue, some cobalt blue, and I'm going to begin painting here at the bottom of this. And as I'm always stressing to my students, you could take it a little slower. You don't have to rush through this part. The blocking is always much quicker. But I'm just starting to add smaller things to the tree itself at this particular point. I don't want to take it too fast. But I can go in there and start putting in some rich darks. But I like to climb up the tree or climb down the tree so that I have the branches adhering to the trunk. You don't have to go all the way out, but I do want them adhering to the trunk and get the consistency of the watercolor. now we go to this inner part of the tree here. And allow things to run together. And by adding small hints of color here and there, allows the tree to become pretty much whole more quickly, allowing it to flow together. And I might be adding a few more branches here and there. Because there's such a number of branches coming off of this tree. And I'm putting down a little bit bolder color at the beginning. I'm not trying to portray the tree in this particular case with every color that I'm seeing. I'm just trying to give my idea of what is actually in the tree, but doing it very quickly because it's got blues and browns and greens and a few violet areas in it. I want to make it semi-colorful, but not too colorful, because this is only the second pass at the tree. And I can always adjust things as I'm moving around the tree. But it's got some great, crazy growth on it. That's part of the interest that I saw in the tree when I first started looking at it. There's actually a waterfall down below, and that's what attracted my eye first. I came up after climbing down and saw this wonderful tree up here, and I had to take a picture of it. But I'm making some of these branches a little bit lighter as they go out, so that they will remain somewhat on the light side, because those are the ones that are further away from us. And let's see if we can get a little bit of that ground to hold the tree up a little bit more. And I'm really having kind of just some fun with this, if nothing else. I'm not painting it literally as far as color goes, but I'm trying to paint it correctly as far as structure goes. Here I'm picking up the toothbrush and adding a few things here and there. Then what I'll do is I'll take my brush where I randomly put in that spray of watercolor and just bring up some vertical angled trees from it to give that feeling of all that saplings falling behind and around the tree. But I always look for trees that have character into them, whether they're highly rooted at the bottom or they have interesting form to them or they're leaning in different directions. But I want to try to get most of these branch structures going on in here to get the feeling of the way this thing was formed. And occasionally you run into trees in the woods, especially along a highly rocky area where trees have actually opened up the rock growing through it. So I guess a paper does beat rock in some cases. So this is our second wash, and it does give the feeling of these trees and the grove behind it kind of coming up without trying to portray it too much. So second wash is complete. You like to leave things dry, don't touch things, but look at all the color that is flowing through here. Not all of it's going to show, but it needed to have that flavor underneath what's going to appear later. Okay, the second phase of the watercolor has dried now. Now the third phase is when you really slow your watercolor down to a crawl. You have the first phase of the block in. The second phase is to build that block end up, leave that dry, and then come back in. Now the third phase is a longer, drawn out phase. Everything is established about where it's going to be, but you take your time on this. Don't rush things. Put a few brush strokes down. Every 3 or 4 brush strokes throughout the whole painting. You want to change your color, your temperature, your value, your intensity, so that you end up variety, so the tree is not all the same color going up or out. So I'm slowing it down at this particular point. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to start working in the middle of the tree, because I feel that the middle section right here needs to be established on the photograph. And again, I'm not really copying the photograph, I'm interpreting more of it. So I'm going to go in and start forming this. And I'm going to put down heavier darks in the subject that you may be painting. Determination of when you start putting down heavier darks is determined by how you want it to be perceived and how your subject matter is. And I'm allowing to be much more careful at this point. And I'm going to kind of phase that off up here. And I'm always telling my students, I'd rather have you use more color than not enough, because it's easier for me to pull you or to push you back than pull you forward. So I'm being a little bit more cautious about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it at this particular point, so that the tree gets its form correct. So don't rush it. Take your time. It's not a race. And if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. Everybody makes mistakes. And the good thing about it is that nobody gets hurt. I want to emphasize this dark in here of this one branch that comes off to the side. And then this branch comes out and drifts away. So I'm going to leave that lighter. But trees are really quite a lot of fun. They have a lot of character. And I'm very carefully working outward on the tree. Don't try to push it. Now I do have a oil painting brush, an old one, and I do like to use this as lifting out. I always get a kick out of the art manufacturers. They actually have tools that they have made for you to lift things out. I even apply watercolor with them. Get an old oil painting brush from a friend, and an old flat toothbrush that's very soft. You get these at the dollar store, or if your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend uses one, borrow theirs and just give it back when you're done. Make sure it's clean now. I like to add a little bit of color in while it's wet or when it's dry. Doesn't make any difference. But this does give a little bit of character to the tree without having to paintbrush it in. But like I say, if you're off a little bit, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But it's the structure of the tree that becomes important. Not that you have everything perfect on the tree. Just make sure it's going in the right direction. Now I'm going to pull out a little bit of light here to separate this forward branch from this trunk that's in back here. And then bring down the light into here so that pushes that back. Remember, lights come forward, darks recede. And I will have to darken that up probably a little bit. And I want to give a little bit of form in here and in here. Not too much. Now, I'm going to cool this down a little bit back here. Then I'll drop some warmth into it down towards the base so it comes towards us. Add the branches in here. And I will add some other things in on top of this as we move. I'm going to strengthen this a little bit up here and play this off of that. So learn how to play your values off of one another. If it's not dark enough, make it darker. If it's too light, make it a little bit darker. If you need to change the value on something, change it. It has to work compositionally. Like I say, I'm using all sorts of different colors here. Just to push the warm against the cool. And then we have shadows that cross the tree and the branches themselves. Because they do cast shadows on themselves with their limbs. But I don't want too much going on up here. I want my focal point of the subject matter down further towards the bottom of the trunk. But I'm kind of making this a lot more colorful than really needs to be, but it's kind of nice that way. I'm going to put a few of these other trees in here to help support the rest of the composition. And I'm going to put them in very simply. Paper towels can be used at any time. Just to lighten a few things here and there. I just want to suggest a few things back here, not make them too prominent. Now, I'm going to go in here and model this area just a little bit more. And you can do this when it's wet or when it's dry. It's still wet enough that I can do a few things with it. Bring this down and anchor it into the ground a little bit more with the root system. I'm going to take a little bit of the green that's up in here. I'm not going to make it as intense, but I'm going to randomly put it up here. And then take my brush, and after it's in there randomly, I'm going to leave some of those splats. So the side of the brush, I'm going to kind of dry brush it around. and work the mass a little bit more so that I didn't have to go around and put every little thing in here. And this gives a much better random look to it. Even if it got into the tree, it kind of adds a nice flavor into the tree. I want to emphasize this dark in here again because you'll find that your colors do lighten up as they dry. And that's something that I'm always telling students cannot be taught. It can only be anticipated through time. But it starts strengthening the tree at this particular point. Now I'm paying a little bit more attention now to some of the larger limbs and what comes off of them. I want those a little bit stronger. I'm not going to pay attention to too many of the smaller ones at this point because I want those to recede anyways. Now you can put watercolor down, you can move it around a little bit, but most of all, put it down and leave it and see what happens, especially if you're learning. I have too many students that are trying to wash it flat. One of the best things about watercolor is that when you put it down, it gives you different effects in one brush stroke. Don't try to take that away from it. It has a wonderful quality of separating in different ways. Now when I'm lifting with my 1-inch flat, I'm actually rinsing it out, and I'm going to go in here with this straight edge and I'm going to pull out a few individual lights here and there to form the tree just a little bit nicer. Give it a little bit of detail without pulling up too much. I'm looking at where the light is hitting on certain branches. and how much I want to emphasize of the tree. Down here is my main focus. Sometimes we get carried away and we want to portray everything that we're seeing. You don't want to do that. Only do the important things. And it's really up to you to eventually find out what the important thing is by doing more and more paintings. As I'm always telling them, practice, practice, practice. Just like a musical instrument. This doesn't come flowing off your fingertips like magic. Although I would have wished it when I was a student. Okay, almost to completion for this demonstration. I feel that it has accomplished what exactly I wanted it to accomplish by showing you how to paint a basic tree without overworking it. Just to give it a little bit of emphasis at the bottom here, and we can call that done for the demonstration. To finish up this discussion on trees, my suggestion to whether you're the beginner, the intermediate, and I know the advanced people already do this, is go out there with a sketchbook and with a ebony pencil, a stick of graphite, and start sketching trees. Look at the form, look at the value, look at how they come out of the ground, look how they rise up, look how the branches go out. But it is practice, and this is what you always need to do, is practice. I filled many sketchbooks when I was a college student. Drawing on the train, I was drawing people, but going out into nature, which is my first love, this is why I do landscapes, go out there and sketch what you're seeing and try to get it as accurate as you can. Squint down for the values when you're painting and open your eyes for the color. And keep on stepping back from your painting. Every 3 or 4, 5, 6 minutes, step back from your painting. Don't start the painting with your nose on the canvas and finish with your nose on the canvas. Get up off of your seat and move back and take and evaluate, what do you need to do next? What's the first thing? What's the second thing? Go back and start doing that, and then stop and continue on again. So I wish you good luck and keep on practicing.